Hello and welcome to our bonus show about the Clash of the Cousins podcast. My name is Anne de Korte, I'm the creator and showrunner, and today I'm here with Vicky.
Hello! Yes, I'm Victoria Howell. I am the writer of episodes 4 and 5 of the podcast. I also directed episodes 5 and 6, and I'm co-producing on the post-production side. I even turn up as an actor in various scenes.
With the other writer, Stephen Goss, before Vicky came on board, already spent countless of hours digging into history, and then Vicky joined us and we looked into even more history, and man, did we read a lot about the history, the fun history of Lucy of Bolingbroke, a person that actually existed. She was the Countess of Chester. We did shape her after the real person, but also added some characteristics that we invented, especially because there's a lot of facts known to us, but it's always very difficult to know people's characters. Technically, one of the major changes that we made was Lucy was dead by the time that we reached this point in the story of 1140. She actually died in 1138, and we're now in 1140, early 1141. So Lucy was a very wealthy heiress, and she married 3 times, and she survived all of them. And actually got so annoyed with having to marry constantly that she paid Henry, after the last husband died, to actually not have to marry again. She paid him 500 marks for that. That little tiny bit maybe have we use as a basis of the character of Lucy that we have created, as she was in our versions this very feisty, very independent character that probably if she would lived in our day and age would have been far much happier than in that day where she was controlled by the husbands around her. As for the story and how it links to history, she did eventually marry the Earl of Chester, and their seat was Lincoln Castle. A lot of children involved, but as per our history, Lucy was not very keen on having children. She was a very, very powerful Neridia, and having a child would mean that she would lose that power. So she refused to have any. So what she did do was accept some of her husband's bastards to keep up a ruse and to keep continuing the life she wanted to live. That was really the basis of this character, her relentless ambition. And there was a lot of political unrest in this northern region, and that also mainly to do with David of Scotland, and his son Prince Henry was at the centre of what all happened in Lincoln and what preceded the siege of Lincoln.
The whole history around Lincoln Castle, there's a lot of back and forth. It's been there a while. It's kind of it's mentioned in the Doomsday Book, so it's been around for at least going on 100 years by this time. So there's a lot of castle swapping going on at this point. Lincoln Castle has recently been taken over by David I of Scotland, and obviously there's a lot of conflict at the moment between Scotland and England, with each of them trying to extend their territories. So if you're King of Scotland, having hold of Lincoln Castle is a really handy stronghold. So obviously David went hell-bent to get hold of that, and the De Chester family is not happy and they want it back. This is Lucy's family. And so it's her son, Ranulph, the second son of her first husband, Ranulph, and his half-brother, William de Rumer, and they regained the castle via a cunning plan, which does genuinely sound like it came out of some Hollywood farce. Their wives went to visit notaries inside the castle, and Ranulph and William dressed up as normal peasants and trotted up to castle to collect their wives, pretending to be servants, waited while the garrison had gone off hunting, so there's a skeleton crew left at home defending the castle. They rock up to the door, they get let in, and the minute they're in, they overpower the skeleton crew, open up the doors, in come their forces, they take the castle back. So they basically rocked up in a full beard and a moustache and took back the castle. It's absolute nonsense, but genuinely true story, so we've put it, of course, into our story. And they're not the best of bosses, are they?
No, apparently they are not. We found some records that there were letters sent to Stephen of peasants and farmers complaining about how they were treated by this, oh my god, awful family. Of course, technically Lucy's dead, so it was in real life all aimed at probably mainly her son. But in our story, of course, we made it all about Lucy, and it kind of fits with her character. She's not a very kind woman. She's very selfish. And she is in that sense also proud Haikatha, proud Neridia, that things first of all, that humans are lesser than Haikathai, and then again, she is this very powerful Haikatha, and everybody below her is worth nothing. So it makes a lot of sense that she treated her submissives absolutely awful. And word got to Stephen, and I'm not saying that Stephen is the most kind-hearted person, that's why he came, but there are some explanations of why Stephen would have come to Lucy's aid.
It could also have been that, it's not handy for the King of Scotland to have a castle in your kingdom. So there's a good chance that in reality it was probably something to do with that. But we've twisted that around to make it about Lucy, basically. If he besieges Lucy into her castle, then she can't go and help Empress Matilda to reclaim the throne. We've said that it's a good chance that he knew about this High Catholic status, and he didn't want to give her any more ammunition, basically. But Lucy, she manages to get a letter out to Empress Matilda, to Maud, appealing for help. And so he's sitting outside the castle sieging them, and Maud's forces turn up in our story and surround him. So you've got layer upon layer. It's like an inception of siege going on. And that breaks the siege, leads us into the Battle of Lincoln, what have you. But also within our story, we've set up a fictitious meeting as well between Stephen and Lucy Bolingbroke, where she reveals her High Catholic status and persuades him, or tries to persuade him, to stop besieging the castle. She threatens him, basically, and shows off her High Catholic powers, and it frightens him into submission. That's the idea there. And technically she could have killed him, but obviously she needed the victory to be seen as Maud's, so she just gave him a display of what she was capable of and sent him scuttling out. And that leads us into, of course, the Battle of Lincoln, which I believe Anna and Stephen will be discussing next week, episode 6.
So yes, that's all going to happen next week. But another nice thing about Lucy and how it all made it link in is that Stephen knew what a formidable enemy Lucy was, or could be. Maud had her trepidations of actually being aligned with Lucy, and during this episode, because we're technically jumping a little bit ahead in the future, like after the Battle of Lincoln, to end this kind of story around Lucy, is that Maud learns that it is actually Lucy who has been responsible technically for everything that's happened, because all of this kicked off with the death of Willem Adelin in the White Ship disaster.
Yes, so the White Ship, of course, you heard all about that from Anna and Stephen in a previous episode, about how that, the repercussions of that, and how it kind of kickstarts our entire story. But in terms of episode 5, the thing they didn't tell you back then, because it would have been a spoiler, was that Lucy claimed responsibility for it. And this is one of those areas where there's a real serendipity between real history and our story. Because in actuality, Ranulph le Mesurier, Lucy's third husband, and his son Ranulph de Gernon were actually with the royal party over in Normandy and came back, were supposed to sail on the White Ship, and didn't because they got off just before. And there's a lot of questions about why that might have happened. Part of the reason is probably because the White Ship was basically, the reason it sank is because everybody was having a massive party, basically. And all the kind of younger members of the royal party had piled onto this boat, got a load of booze, everybody was drunk. And there's a theory that he was maybe hungover, he was already partied out and he just needed a bit of peace and a lie down. Also, Stephen of Blois, who was Henry's nephew, of course, and caused this whole palaver, he also got off the boat because, some say because he had diarrhea, some say because other reasons, but we went with diarrhea because poo is always funny. So he got off the boat, Ranulph and his son, so they get off the boat with Stephen, they go on the other boat, which gets back safely. And so this is very handy for us. So we twist it into the suggestion that Lucy has controlled her husband, who in our story has become fascinated with Hecathic magic. He's become an Andratha, which is a normal person, a human who is obsessed with Hecathic magic and tries to use Hecathic objects and relics and to create magic. And of course they're not designed to handle this kind of ability, and so it causes severe kind of mental traumas and disabilities. And so we have said that because Ranulph is an Andratha, it's very easy for Lucy to control him, to manipulate him into sabotaging the White Ship and basically wiping out the royal family, because everybody's on there. And the catch in this plan is that Stephen gets off the boat. He's not supposed to get off the boat. He's supposed to die with everybody else, and that leaves a clear path for Matilda. So yeah, it's a really handy handy little bit of actual history that plays really nicely and segues really nicely into our story. And it's really lovely when that kind of thing happens. You know, it makes it feel like, it really grounds the story and makes it feel like it's supposed to be. It's like a little puzzle piece just slots into place. And yeah, it's very satisfying when that kind of thing happens.
Yes, and of course, Maud was absolutely not happy with this when she found out, because she did not necessarily way back when wanted to be queen. She definitely now wants to be queen instead of Stephen, but she would have been happy for her brother to have been king. And she liked her brother, she loved her brother, and she was fucking mad that Lucy was responsible for his death, and therefore reckoned Lucy. And that was still then the end of Lucy of Bolingbroke, about 3 years later, as it happened in real life, and by completely different means. But yeah, that's a sort of like a bit of the summary of the crazy real history that laid at the base of this particular episode. Because, oh my god, it is crazy.
It's totally nuts.
If we would have made it up, we would have... Really? You're going to do that?
Yeah, exactly. You couldn't make it
but
up.
We now could do it, because it was actually real history, and that is a lovely stick to hide, a lovely wall to hide behind, or a stick, or whatever the English expression is. But therefore, it was quite fun to write this episode, and we do hope we gave you a bit of background information on what actually did happen in real life and how we weave that in. And we hope you enjoyed it. And we hope you will come back for another one of these next week.